Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Equally Yoked Show. I'm your host, Charles. We're going to be going over some news stories such as the JFK assassination and what's happening with Israel right now. There is so much news going on the forefront, and we just can't keep up with the news. There's so much happening as of late, and maybe we'll tie it all into some biblical understanding, biblical doctrine. We'll see if we get there or not, if we have the time, because it's already quite the late hour as the show is entitled. We're going to be looking at the JFK assassination first. Now, first of all, there is the documents that came out just today. Actually, we saw that Trump, during the beginning of his administration, he had put out an executive order to release files, and he wanted to do some really just release all the files unredacted. And he wanted to do that with JFK, with MLK, and RFK. Not only that, he wants to do some looking into the 9/11 files and much more stuff that he actually put a team together to be able to do this kind of stuff, to just bring more transparency to the American people. We've been under lies. We've been told things that were just not true. I mean, that makes those lies, of course. But today is a big day for this news with regards to the JFK files. And we can also not forget to mention the Epstein files that are supposed to, or the Epstein list, right? That is supposed to release as well. So, with regards to JFK, there has been so much news already starting to cover everything that has happened. Now, upon some research, we are finding that there's no real new verdict with this single or lone shooter theory. Now, I think if you want to do and look at a good breakdown, you can actually go and look at a man by the name of Monkey Works. He does an excellent breakdown as to looking into Harvey Oswald, and he looks at the credentials of his past, of his military experience. And he really breaks it down as to why he wouldn't have been the only shooter in this instance. Even an animation that I can actually show you will make you question the things that we've been hearing or the things that we've thought of, right? The theories. So I'm gonna look for a video here, and while I get that going, let's look at a news story, and we'll see exactly what they have to say about this, and we'll just listen in. This is my initial reaction to this news story. Breaking. Let me switch it over to you. Here we go.
Welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall. Well, today was the day. Thousands of pages of previously unseen files related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy were released today. Right now, over 1,100 documents totaling roughly 80,000 pages are visible on the National Archives website. This comes after President Trump's push to release the files, and standing by is a man who knows the history of the assassination well, presidential historian and author James Robinault. What have we learned today, James?
Well, Austin, we learned a lot about the CIA. Most of these documents are CIA-type documents. From their plan to try to assassinate Castro, Operation Mongoose is what it was called. Lots of detail on that, involving mafia figures to help them. It's an incredible story. To Jack Ruby and Oswald being seen in a nightclub, according to a CIA memo, weeks before the assassination, to all sorts of discredit on the single bullet theory that the ballistics people thought, that this just didn't happen back when the Warren report came out, to the CIA operation out of Mexico City, and all the intelligence they were gathering on Oswald. So it is a truckload of information. It's going to take weeks to analyze. There are 100-page depositions in it. It truly is a real trove of information that begins to paint a much stronger picture that the CIA knew kind of what was coming and may have been involved in the group out of Miami that was the anti-Castro group that may have been setting up Oswald. So a ton of stuff.
Does this change the official narrative?
I think it will. I mean, I think what we're going to end, as I've said before, this is like a big jigsaw puzzle, and we have a lot of pieces in place. What we didn't know were some of the identities of some of these people, and the CIA documents, everybody's got a code name. So that's going to take a long while for people to unravel. But I think it's going to show that they were very active with the group that was entangled with Oswald in New Orleans in the summer of 1963. And the evidence is starting to look more and more like they were setting up Oswald, and that the anti-Castro group were the people who might have pulled the triggers. So I think there's a lot here to work with, a lot to analyze. And as you know, because of Paul Landis's revelation that he found the bullet in the limousine that you and I have talked about so much, that tends to prove there was an ambush, that there were multiple shooters. This will then start to give us a better idea of who might have been involved.
Yeah, so let's back up on that. So for people that are watching that haven't watched our interviews before, why do you feel it is appropriate to question the actual story, and you know what? I will say this too, by the way. The official version of the story is that Oswald was the lone gunman. So why do you feel like it's fair to question that theory?
Yeah, I think that the main thing is that when Paul Landis found the pristine bullet behind where Kennedy had been sitting and Jackie had been sitting, it showed that that bullet had only gone superficially into his back and that it fell back out. That means that the bullet didn't go through him into Conley, which is the official version. And, one bullet caused all this damage, which nobody ever believed. The problem is Kennedy gets hit, and within a split second, you can see that Conley gets hit. So there's not enough time for Oswald, who has a bolt action, to shoot about 3 seconds, load and shoot again to hit Conley. So there had to be multiple shooters. And once we know that there's a conspiracy. Once we know there's a conspiracy, then the question is who was involved in it. But that evidence is pretty strong that there were multiple shooters.
From what you have seen of the documents, are there redactions?
No, I haven't yet seen any, and I've seen people write who've been through a lot more than I have that they haven't seen them yet. I think they really did take off the redactions. And again, this is going to help put together these pieces of the puzzle, because you have these various people who are identified in Miami. You have the people identified in Mexico City. And now you're starting to put all this stuff together to see what the puzzle looks like once you put those pieces in.
So I got to ask, this is something that you and I have talked about ad nauseum. I mean, the assassination happened in the 60s. Here we are in the 2020s now talking about this. Why did it take so long for these documents to be released?
I think the answer to that is that when the Warren report came out, President Johnson and Hoover in particular were very much trying to end the controversy and not spark World War III. They were worried that this was going to be blamed on the Cubans. They were worried it was going to be blamed on the Russians, and they were not willing to risk nuclear war over all of this. So
that's very interesting of a theory to think about, that they didn't want to spark World War III. That makes sense. I mean, I'd understand why that would be the case, but that's kind of like, I don't know. That just doesn't seem to just sit right. It seems like there's still more to uncover with this, all the information that they're finding. Now, based on the evidence and everything that we're talking about here on this video, I did want to show you. This was a clip that I wanted to look at with you with regards to the single bullet theory. Let's see if we can find the, here it is. This is from Zach D Films. He made an animation with regards to what? Just the theory, the single bullet theory, kind of why it falls apart here.
A single bullet was fired from a rifle on a 6th floor window. First, it entered JFK's upper back and traveled downward, exiting through his throat. Then it struck the governor in the back, shattering a rib as it tore through his chest. The bullet continued, exiting the governor's chest and hitting his right wrist, breaking a bone. Finally, it lodged itself into the governor's thigh, where it stayed until removed by doctors in almost perfect condition. Now, investigators claimed that this is what happened. A single bullet caused 6 wounds while staying intact. But many argue that the bullet's trajectory is impossible. The angles just don't add up, leaving us wondering if there was actually more than one bullet.
So that is one of the theories there with regards to the single bullet, like just what was tossed around at the beginning of all of this. And it doesn't make sense how a bullet can just stick in a straight path, because we know that when it impacts, bullets kind of go crazy. I mean, they go erratic. Okay, so once they hit something, what is playing? I think it was an ad. Okay, sorry about that. So, yeah, the single bullet theory kind of falls apart when you start to look at the evidence as to, how the bullet traveled in this manner, right? There is the ideas still being thrown around that this is a more than just one person event, one person shooter. This is the two shooter theory here. And so there was even theories of 3 shooters, but those are just, again, theories. We have no idea yet, as all this stuff is still being combed through. I mean, it's 80,000 documents worth of all of this information. And then you have to connect the dots. You have to see, what kind of might fit into the, that would make sense, not just another conspiracy. I mean, this is a lot of documents, especially with the documents that were already released, but mostly redacted. And so, as he mentioned, there's possibly no redactions. So let's continue on here.
They very much pushed the Warren Commission to get it done, blame it on one person. And at that point, the Warren Commission came out with a report that started to fall apart almost right away, but a lot of people still hung on to it. And the only reason that it's taken all these years is that the CIA convinced president after president that there were still people alive, there were still operations that they needed to protect. And it's only really in the last year that we finally have somebody saying, well, enough of that. Let's see all of it. It cannot be that we are going to destroy people or operations 60 years later. But it's going to be embarrassing, which it is, to the CIA.
Can you help us differentiate between reliable sources and conspiracy theories that are out there? There's no shortage of conspiracy theories related to this assassination. And when you start to question the official narrative of something, of course, conspiracy theories are ever more apparent during those times as well. I got to ask you, James, how do you, when you're researching this, and as you're doing research and looking through these documents, what advice would you have for people to avoid misinformation related to the assassination?
Well, you look for people who, when they say something, have evidence to back it up and aren't getting into speculation. A lot of conspiracy theories say, well, here's what we know, and then here's my speculation. They go off in wild tangents. And I'll give you a good example. I've said this before, the Mary Farrell group, which has their has primary source documents online. Jefferson Morley, who I interviewed for Vanity Fair, these guys are very careful journalists. They have to have proof before they say something, but they also can put things together and support it with evidence. So you're really looking for people who have carefully scoured the record, can point to documents, and are not based in just raw speculation about crazy stuff in particular. That's one tell. But people like Jefferson Morley and Mary Farrell, go to that website. When they say something, they'll show you the document they're relying on. And that's important. You need to have facts.
So what's next? More documents? Are we expecting more releases?
Yeah, as I understand it, this is a first tranche. That there's still a lot more to come out, and so I think we will see that over the next few days. I think more. What happened was Trump said get it all out, and I think the lawyers of the Department of Justice stayed up all night trying to make sure they could release some stuff, but they haven't released all of it. So that's still to come. And then what's really going to happen is people who are very deep into this are going to start to analyze it very closely and pull stuff out and point it out. And it's going to be fascinating. It's like a big detective story. It's really amazing stuff, especially when you read some of these memos on Project Mongoose, the whole operation to assassinate Castro with pills and, all sorts of stuff. I mean, it really, you'll be amazed, I think, once this begins to really get analyzed over the next few weeks.
I think it's going to be interesting, as he mentions, over the next few weeks. There's going to be documentaries. There's going to be, video views, not views, but videos being made with regards to everything that is on these documents. And I can see already people like CoffeeZilla, looking at this stuff. I mean, possibly. I don't really watch his content, but I know he does deep dives into all of this. I mean, even somebody like Film Theorist, the Film Theory channel, very big on all this stuff. And I wouldn't doubt that they would take all of this information and bring it into a video, most certainly. Now we have things like AI to just skim these documents like crazy, and what's being put out there online. You can ask ChatGPT or Grok, and it will spit out an answer to you of the things that have been found so far. And quite interesting when you just look at that stuff. But I wanted to look at a article from Monkey Works that talks about this assassination here. And you're probably not going to be able to see any of this. Let me see here if I can squeeze that down. Now, whatever you can see, we'll go over. But this is something that he takes a look at, right? This is Marine Corps scorebook. Okay, this is Oswald. Here's a date that was issued. Some further information. The rifle. It says, now, before we look further at the marksman qualification, I must tell you that Miss Monkey, his wife, was also a marksman in her USAF days. And that's the U.S. Air Force. And it says, and although she is proficient, she certainly isn't a crack shot. I was not a marksman. In fact, the guy next to me was shooting my target, and I was disqualified from getting top honors. All of that said, my groupings today were tighter than my fist. So that is to say that unless you are in the sniper MOS, most of the marksman qualifications provided by the services are really not what everyone thinks they are, as it is highly controlled, static environment. Had Oswald actually been a Marine sniper, we would be having a completely different conversation, as he was in fact a radar operator. So he takes a look at his responsibilities in the Marine Corps. He was a radar operator, not a sniper, not a marksman. According to his findings, when he dives a bit deeper, he says, let's just assume for a minute that Oswald indeed was a crack shot. The 4 rifles used, which in recent years have been identified by the actual gunsmith hired by the CIA to modify the rifles, was the Italian-made 735 Mannlicher In fact, or Monlicker, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. In fact, Mr. Robert Morrow has since come forward and stated he was a contractor working for the CIA at the time and that he recognized the modified rifle when it was held up by the FBI as evidence. Now, this is important, says Morrow claims in his book that he customized the rifles so that they could be dismantled, hidden, and reassembled quickly. He also claims that he supplied CIA operative David Ferry with 4 radio transceivers that were not detectable and communications equipment not then available on the market. This is where it gets interesting because according to the experts, this rifle takes anywhere from 8 to 12 seconds to shoot and reload, plus the time it takes to get back on target, which was moving and 88 yards away. The 3 shots, according to the Warren Commission, were all completed within 5.6 seconds. So according to their single lone gunman theory, Oswald was able to outperform the rifle's specifications as those 3 shots should have been taken anywhere from 24 to 36 seconds to perform in total. You may also note that Morrow did not say anything about trigger modifications, etc., other than the gun's ability to break down and concealed. No other aspect of the rifles were modified. This brings us to the eyewitness accounts of shots along with flashes and smoke coming from the grassy knoll, because no matter how you slice it, sound echoes from one direction do not produce flashes and smoke in another. So he goes on to talk about the different witnesses and the things that they possibly were going to testify, or the things that they knew with regards to this, the things that they heard, the things that they saw. And a lot of these people mysteriously died. Very interesting as he breaks it down in depth with all of this information here. So I just wanted to bring that out to your attention and really just get this stream started with that. Let's take a look at this second clip here.
About an hour ago, posted on the National Archives website, are what the Trump administration says are tens of thousands of never-before-seen memos, some intelligence reports, troves of top-secret documents. We are talking more than 1,100 PDFs, and President Trump has promised full transparency, no redactions. And we've been sifting through so many of those pages after the DOJ lawyers have been working all night to do the same. One detail that has been debated for decades: the single bullet theory. That is the official account that one bullet caused a number of wounds in both JFK and the governor he was riding with, the path of that bullet, and doubts over who was responsible for firing this shot has fueled so many of the conspiracies we've heard over the years.
A single bullet caused 6 wounds while staying intact. But many argue that the bullet's trajectory is impossible. The angles just don't add up.
How, where, and when did the CIA surveil Lee Harvey Oswald?
My father was walking at the bottom of the hill with John McComb when I got home, who's the CIA director. My father said to him, "Did your people do this?" So his initial instinct was that the CIA had killed his brother.
This mouse backpack is the best I've ever.
Ads. So we have some testimony from JFK, which is very interesting there. I mean, his family was all, I mean, they were the closest to this incident happening. Of course, they're going to, I mean, what do they know? Is there things that they can't say? Who knows?
That was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. there recounting his father's suspicions of U.S. government involvement in the JFK assassination back in 1963. Today, almost half of Americans have similar thoughts. One poll from a couple of years ago found that 43% believe the U.S. government was involved somehow. So Did today's document dump get us any closer to finding definitive answers? Let us hope so. So joining us now is Gerald Posner, who literally wrote the book about JFK and the assassination there. Gerald, thanks so much for being with us. 80,000 documents. I'm so sorry to ask you an hour after they're released, but have you been able to sort through and find any bombshells?
Yeah, no bombshells yet, but I hope springs eternal because this is only 1,123 records. We expect another 30,000 to 35,000 pages tomorrow, and maybe they're holding the best material for the last bit. Doing a bit of drama that would be perfect with the Trump administration spin.
Yeah, that would be definitely fit the MO at least. Does it look like the president rebuked the CIA here? Was there some internal fighting behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You just hit the nail on the head. The first time that when Trump was president, his inclination was to release them because, he's been suspicious about the so-called deep state. And so you'd think he would say no to the CIA to withhold any of these files back. But he listened to Mike Pompeo, who was then the CIA director, who said, you can't release them because there's some sources, information, and some confidential material. That's one of the reasons I don't think you see Pompeo on Trump 2.0. So now Trump is ready to go. He wants the files out, and we're finally getting them. They should have been done. Biden could have released them as well. So, I'm glad that they are out.
And now that they're out, I mean, do you have any predictions as to what we might see here?
So, my predictions, a lot of people, if you ask them on the street, what do you think you're going to find in the JFK files? They think they're going to find the second shooter of the assassination.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to skip that because we already kind of got some information with regards to that on the JFK files. But we can see that there's a lot that's happening, a lot that's being said about this information. And so we're just going to continue on with the next news story. We see that Israel resumes fighting in Gaza. This is an important video. There's a thing that is mentioned on this clip. I think it's going to be very important to take a look at because we'll get there. We'll get there. It's really good. Really, really interesting to point something out here.
Have been following the breaking news after Israel launched a series of airstrikes in Gaza, killing more than 400 people. And this just in right here from the Israel Defense Forces stating that the head of the Hamas government and the most senior figure of authority in Gaza and was responsible for the functioning of Hamas's terror regime in Gaza has been eliminated, according to the IDF. He also oversaw the integration of all of Hamas's branches in Gaza and their use for terrorist purposes. Dozens of terrorist targets, the IDF says, were struck to hinder Hamas's governmental and military capabilities and to remove threats to Israel, including numerous mid-level and senior-ranking terrorists in Hamas's political bureau who were eliminated. And you can see the photos of the 4 leaders they say were eliminated in this. This comes as Israel launched a series of airstrikes in Gaza, killing more than 400 individuals, shattering a ceasefire in place since January with its deadliest bombardment in a 17-month war with Hamas. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordering the strikes after Hamas refused Israeli demands to change the ceasefire agreement. Officials said the operation was open-ended and expected to expand. The White House saying that it had a consultation with Israel and voiced support for Israel's actions. The Israeli military ordered people to evacuate eastern Gaza and head towards the center of the territory, indicating that Israel could soon launch renewed ground operations. So we did want to bring you the very latest news as we are learning more from this. I also wanted to share this live look from Gaza as it is nighttime right here, a live look outside the Al-Aqsa hospital there in Gaza as the Israeli Defense Forces now stating that Hamas leader Issam al-Delias was eliminated along with several others over the past 24 hours. We are going to continue to follow all of the latest developments in this breaking news. We also brought you the United Nations as we were hearing from ambassadors from both Israel and Gaza discussing the very latest Israeli strikes. The U.S. defending this action, blaming Hamas for, quote, resumption of hostilities.
You know, what's interesting is, boy, I did not want to do that, is the fact that we have constantly been hearing of this is actually not even the video that I was thinking of, but anyway, with that respect, we have so much information that has come out with regards to the Gaza and Hamas situation, the Israel Hamas situation, where we continue to see a narrative that is being portrayed by the media, of course, mainstream media, and they have continued to say a lot of things that pertain to a false narrative that they want to really help change the mind of the people into thinking that Hamas is the victim here when they really aren't. We talk about the narrative that is currently being played, saying that there is 400 plus people from Gaza being killed or that have been killed. And this comes from the Gaza Health Administration. I believe that is what it's called. And yet these are unconfirmed numbers. Go figure. The Gaza Health Administration is actually ran by Hamas. And so when we see the fact that they've lied on the media, they've lied for people to believe, and people have believed, America has believed, the last year since October 7th it happened, that they made people believe that Hamas was the victim. And unfortunately, that narrative took off and it carried on. And so now when people are seeing the fact that Israel has launched strikes in Gaza, killing over 400, we're going to see the media twisting all of it. From 400 people, unconfirmed deaths, mind you, unconfirmed. Not only that, was Israel notifying the people of Gaza to move because they were going to conduct strikes in the area. So they were warned beforehand. It's not like there was just random strikes. No, they were warned beforehand. So the narrative that you're going to start seeing is, oh, there's people being murdered again in Gaza and all this nonsense. But let's look at the facts. Let's look at the truth behind all of it. The truth is that Israel will still conduct their operations in a very humane way, in the sense that they are going to attack strategically and not just attack willy-nilly, right? Not just because leaders are here, but there's also the account being taken into the fact that Hamas people, the militia, what they do is they hide themselves in buildings, civilian buildings. They put their operations within civilian buildings, schools, government offices, right? I say government offices, but offices. They've ran an operation under one of the UN buildings. I believe it was the UN buildings. Preschools. I mentioned schools, but let's mention preschools. I mean, there's no limits to where they hide themselves. Under a hospital, they had their major operation. Under Gaza, they created tunnels, rat hole tunnels, because they live like rats, hiding from IDF, from Israel and military personnel. These people are evil. And so when they take and they go and they slaughter innocent people, take them hostage, 1,300, Israel has a right to go and destroy and to do whatever they need to do to get their people back and to bring justice to the families that were affected by this. I always bring up this point. If this happened to America, which in some respects it has, with the infiltration of illegal immigration, illegal migrants that have come through to rape, kill, destroy, plunder American communities, gang members that have come over across the border to bring in drugs, kill our youth, our elderly. This has, in some respect, happened to America, right? But not to the extent that happened in Gaza, or in Israel, rather, where they, on October 7th, shot thousands upon thousands of missiles into Israel. And by God's grace, a lot of them were intercepted by the Iron Dome. But not only that, did they actually successfully, but that was a diversionary tactic, right? The missiles, the thousands of missiles was a diversionary tactic so that they can go in and infiltrate and go to the concert, take civilians, take lives, murder, kill, rape, steal, all that stuff. They did all of that. They took all of these hostages. They brought them into the tunnels, into the pits of hell in Gaza, to let them starve, to let them die, to mutilate them. All of this, all of the above, from under a year old to elderly people, grandmas, grandpas, babies. And people say Israel has no right to do that. Israel's committing genocide. Yeah, sure. Crazy. So when we look at all this information that is coming out, they resumed fighting in Gaza. They have eliminated the head of Hamas, one of the elites of the head of Hamas government, which is very great news. And there's more information with regards to this whole story. We'll just let it unfold. The Houthis are also attacking U.S. carrier ships. The U.S. is not going to allow any more of that to happen, as with the Biden administration. There is so much stuff that is just on that front. Middle East war news is just crazy, and it's only going to get even crazier. Biblically speaking, we have the Middle East being the center, the epicenter of all of this stuff that is to happen, that needs to be fulfilled, the prophecies and everything. So as we continue on to look at the news, as we continue to look at every piece bit by bit, and your boy Austin, yes, sir, this is live. As we look at everything, the news that is happening, I mean, the Bible talks about what is to happen. There's some interesting, the interesting information that I wanted to show you with regards to the news was actually a deal. And I'll play that for you because I think it is important to look at what that possibly means. And this pertains to Putin and Trump. New details that are coming out with regards to the ceasefire, with regards to ending that war front. We talk about this. Let's go over there for a sec. Very important.
Here for you on Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Mike Page. Thanks again for joining us. We do want to update you on some breaking news. We knew that the call was going on with President Trump and Putin. That has wrapped up. It went over 2 hours talking about what is the latest with the war in Ukraine, what are some of the pathways to getting a ceasefire. And we are getting some new details from that call. Fox News' Jackie Heinrich mentioning this, saying that The White House putting out this readout saying today President Trump and President Putin spoke about the need for peace and a ceasefire in the Ukraine war. Both leaders agreed this conflict needs to end with a lasting peace. They also stressed the need for improved bilateral relations as well. The leaders agreed that the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire as well as technical negotiations on implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. Full ceasefire and permanent peace. These negotiations will begin immediately in the Middle East. The leaders spoke broadly about the Middle East as a potential cooperation to prevent future conflicts as well. They further discussed the need to stop proliferation of strategic weapons and will engage with others to ensure the broadest possible application. The two leaders shared the view that Iran should never be in a position to destroy Israel. The two leaders agreed that a future with an improved bilateral relationship between the United States and Russia has huge upside.
So that thing that he mentioned there, he mentions the fact that Iran should never have I forget the word he used, but the ability to destroy or to eliminate Israel. I'm changing some words there. When we look at the biblical world stage in books like Ezekiel outlines the fact that there's this leader named Gog who will have a thought put in his mind. And this thought that gets put in his mind, he actually is, a hook is put in his jaw, and his sort of whole face is turned. He's turned about to his evil thought. And that is to go and invade Israel. Now we can actually look at that passage and really break it down. And this all might make sense. This all might make sense for you. So let's take a look. Let's go on to our trusty Bible app. And when we go on to Ezekiel 38, we're going to see it all possibly come into fruition. Now, this is a prophecy against Gog. And it says, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face toward Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech, Tubal, and prophesy against him, saying, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Now, these areas would be in Russia, right? And I will turn you about and put hooks in your jaws, and I will bring you out, and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in full armor, a great host of all of them, with buckler and shield, wielding swords. Persia, that's that word right there, Persia. This is modern day Iran, Persia. They used to be known as Persians. They used to speak or identify themselves as Persians, but the regime, Khomeini, and the Islamic Party, they decided that they're no longer going to be called Persians or identify with the name Persia. Very interesting. But their ancient name, Persia, Cush, and Put are with them, all of them with shield and helmet. It says Gomer and all his hordes, Beth Togarma from the uttermost parts of the north with all his hordes. Now look at that is key, the uttermost parts of the north. Now when we talk about north, east, south, and west of whatever is mentioned in the Bible, we're talking about north, east, south, and west of Israel. Israel is the center of it all. Israel is the epicenter of the biblical narrative. So when we're talking about the northernmost parts here, the uttermost parts of the north, we're talking about, what's the furthest north of Israel. That is Russia. That is going to be Russia, the land of Russia. And we see here it says, "Be ready and keep ready, you and all your hosts that are assembled about you, and be a guard for them. After many days you'll be mustered. In the latter years you will go against the land that is restored from war, the land whose people were gathered from many peoples upon the mountains of Israel, which had been a continual waste. Its people were brought out from the peoples and now dwell securely, all of them. You will advance, coming on like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land, you and all your hordes and many peoples with you." Now it says right here, the land that is restored from war. We know that before Israel became a nation in 1948, even after that, they had faced continual war, and they're still facing continual war. The land will eventually be even more so restored from war because of what we see happening in Gaza, what we see happening on all fronts of Israel. This is all important to the world stage. It's all important. So at a certain point, I'll keep reading on and we'll get a bigger picture. It says, "Thus says Lord God, on that day, thoughts will come into your mind and you will devise an evil scheme." So on that same day, the thoughts will come into this person's mind as God puts a hook in his jaw and turns him. He says, "I will go against the wall of unwalled villages. I will fall upon the quiet people who dwell securely, all of them dwelling without walls and having no bars or gates." Now, Israel right now lives with bars, gates. To get into Gaza, to get into Jordan and Samaria, or known as West Bank, you have to go through a set of security clearances, walls, and all these types of things to just eventually get there. Okay, they're not dwelling securely right now, especially the fact that they're in and facing a war on many fronts with the Yemen Houthis, with the Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran. So let's continue on. It says, once he gets this evil thought, he will go and devise a scheme, an evil scheme. It says in verse 12, "To seize, spoil, and carry off plunder, to turn your hand against the waste places that are now inhabited." So they were waste, but they're now inhabited with people. And we see that in Israel. There's people in Israel. They've been gathered. It says the people who were gathered from the nations. We know that Israel has been scattered. The Jewish people have been scattered across the nations. They've been scattered across to America, to Europe, to Germany, to Russia, to Paris, France, right? They've been scattered. But now they're gathered. Ezekiel 36, 37 talks about the regathering of Israel back to the land. But then it says here, they've acquired livestock and goods who dwell in the center of the earth. We get that scripture that tells us that Israel is in the center of the earth. Whether that's literal, but I think it is a literal mention of the fact that everything revolves around Israel, because this is God's time clock. This is God's people. This is where it all starts. This is where it all begins. It begins with God bringing the nation of Israel to what it is today. That's where we get all our languages, right? Started from that land. Then he says, "Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all its leaders will say to you, 'Have you come to seize the spoil? Have you assembled your host to carry off plunder, to carry away silver and gold, and take away livestock and goods, to seize great spoil?' So therefore, son of man, prophesy and say to Gog, 'Thus says the Lord God, on that day when my people Israel are dwelling securely,'" remember that's a key phrase, dwelling securely, "will you know it? You will come from your place out of the uttermost parts of the north, you and many peoples with you, all of them riding on horses, a great host, a mighty army. You will come against my people, Israel, like a cloud covering the land. In the latter days, I will bring you against my land, that the nations may know me. When through you, O Gog, I vindicate my holiness before their eyes. So at this point, we see that God's holiness will be vindicated. God will be known. Verse 17 and on goes to speak about what happens. Ezekiel 39, we see that it comes to pass, but then God destroys them. Very interesting stuff here. When we look at what is happening with Israel, we must understand that there's a bigger picture here. It's not just the fact that they've got these ongoing conflicts with Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran. I mean, Iran's the head of it all. This is the octopus, the one that has the many tentacles, right? The ring of fire that we talk about. There's a bigger story here. There's a bigger picture here. That Iran wants to destroy Israel, but at some point, we don't see that now because Israel's not dwelling securely. It's not dwelling safely. A land with unwalled villages. Eventually, it will have no walls. It'll be dwelling securely, possibly peace treaties. And so what is being said there in that interview that I mentioned is that they want to make sure that Iran cannot go and continue to do what they're trying to do with Israel. Very important to look and analyze that. We cannot overlook that whatsoever. So as I leave you with that, I just want to pray that God would give you insight into the scripture, that you go and research the scripture. You just don't take what I'm saying at face value. You go and research it thoroughly, understand it, and look at Israel. Look at Israel and the things that are happening with Israel, and see if you can point out all these things that are happening and where Israel's going. We know where Israel's going, but we must keep praying for Israel. As your scripture says, Lord, that we are to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We must be praying for that. So I give that command to you guys. I turn that back to you guys. Now I give that. It's not my command. It's God's command for you to pray for Israel. So I'm going to wrap that up, guys. It's been so great to break all of this down for you. I will see you guys in the next episode. Until then, keep it locked here. See you guys in the next one. Peace.